Hi, welcome to Observations. I'm host John Walsh, publisher of the Palm Coast and Ormond Beach Observer community newspapers. Observations is a collection of podcasts and videos of conversations with neighbors, community partners, elected officials, and friends about local issues that are taking place in many communities.
Hello, welcome to Observations. I'm host John Walsh. Today we have a special guest, Sadye Dexter, joining us from Life is Ketaful. Life is Ketaful is a ketamine clinic located at Ormond Beach, and we're really excited to have you here. Welcome, Sadye.
Thank you so much for having me.
Great. So I guess a good place to start today would be, Sadye, what was your journey to get involved with ketamine therapy, which is somewhat still new to a lot of people?
It is. My history is in nursing, and I am a nurse practitioner. So one of the co-founders of Life is Ketaful, Dr. Walsh, I used to work with him at Halifax. He's a nurse anesthetist, and
so you were a traditional, I'm going to say traditional nurse. What sort of specialties were you involved in?
Sure, yes. I'm a registered nurse for the last 11 years, and I worked in the open heart unit and critical care, as well as opening another program over at Halifax, which I did the last few years I was there. Most recently, I worked as a nurse practitioner in primary care.
You've got a lot of letters behind your name. What do they all mean?
It means I went to school for
forever.
Too many years to
great.
learn a lot about nursing.
And so how about that school career? Where did you finish up?
Most recently at Chamberlain College of Nursing to get my graduate degree, master's.
Great. So tell me a little bit about the founder of your practice, Dr. Bill Self.
He and his wife opened the practice in 2017, and he is very passionate about using ketamine for the treatment. It's off-label treatments because ketamine is an anesthesia drug.
What do you mean by off-label? What does that mean?
So ketamine was developed to be used for anesthesia. The FDA has approved it for the use of anesthesia alone. However, much like many other drugs, we find other reasons to use it in clinical practice and in hearing feedback from patients. So over the last 30 to 40 years, it has been proven to help with some other mental health disorders, such as treatment-resistant depression, PTSD, and some chronic pain conditions.
Okay, so Dr. Self, nurse practitioner, was that it?
He's a nurse anesthetist.
Okay, and so he was there with you at Halifax.
Yes.
And in the anesthesia
department.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And when did the light come on that hey, there's a better application or a different application for this ketamine?
Yes, it's been used off-label, so not as the FDA initially thought it would be used. We're hoping that it will be approved by the FDA for these other conditions, these mental health conditions, in the near future.
Okay, so that would maybe alarm some people that, okay, it doesn't have the full approval.
Correct.
But the drug has actually been around, as you said, for many, many years?
Yes, I believe it was 1969 or 1970 when it first was approved for general use in anesthesia.
Okay, so it sounds to me that, with today's COVID world and vaccinations, they're worried about side effects. So side effects are not always negative.
That's correct. Sometimes side effects clue us into other uses of the drug, and that is true in so many drugs. For example, a very common drug used in primary care, many people are on a beta blocker for their heart. Beta blockers are also used to treat migraines and tremors. But some of those other reasons to use the medication were kind of found offhand. Another funny one is Viagra. Viagra was initially developed to treat pulmonary hypertension, which is a problem in the lungs where the blood pressure is too high in the lungs, and so people can't breathe well. The blood flow isn't working correctly. we found out it had another effect on the male population, and that is what it is most known for now. So through its trials and tribulations, it's been found that ketamine is useful for the use of improving, not necessarily curing, but improving the quality of life in patients who have treatment-resistant depression, PTSD, and chronic pain issues.
So let's back up a little bit. Okay, so you're working at Halifax Health in Daytona.
Previously,
with
yes.
Dr. Self.
Yes.
And how long did you guys work together before this came about, this opportunity?
So ironically, we had gone our separate ways. We didn't work in the same department to start with, but we knew each other.
Sure.
And while I was working this last year in primary care, we crossed paths again and got to talking. And he was looking to expand the clinic to offer more than just ketamine services, to include primary care as well, so that we can really take care of the patient as a whole, not just mental health, not just IV infusions, which we offer as well, but head to toe, complete care. And I was looking for a new opportunity, and the stars aligned, and here we are. I'll be offering primary care in the clinic, and the ketamine, I'll step in for him as well with the ketamine because he is very busy.
I see. And was the ketamine his motivation to open the new clinic, or just general health?
No, the ketamine was definitely the motivation to open the clinic. He felt very strongly that there was a need, and there are not very many clinics around. The closest one to here was St. Augustine, but I believe they just closed for one reason or another. So we are, I believe, the only clinic up through Georgia.
Okay, somewhat pioneers in the industry.
Yes, for sure. I mean, hopefully in the next coming years or decade, this will continue to be progressive and become more readily available for patients because it is immensely effective, somewhere in the range of 60 to 80% for most patients, which compared to traditional treatment, including medications and therapy, those fall under 75%.
Is that right? Okay, great. I think at this point, let's take a little break.
Okay.
When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about the drug itself and the applications. You mentioned a couple. We'll drill down on those a little bit. And thanks again for joining us. I'm John Walsh, and thanks again for watching Observations.
At The Observer, we work to make sure you receive engaging and relevant content you can't find anywhere else. Our coverage not only delivers news and information focused on where you live, work, and play, but we also aim to surprise and delight with fresh ideas and features. On our new podcast channel, you'll find more of the stories you love. We'll also bring to you exclusive conversations with engaged members of our community that expand on some of those hot topics. We appreciate you stopping by and hope you'll tune in.
Welcome back to Observations. Joining me today is Sadye Dexter from Life is Ketaful. And right now, let's drill down a little bit, Sadye, about the actual ketamine therapies. Sort of 3 specific applications I hope you can share with us. So tell us a little bit about treatment on depression.
So outside of its initial use in anesthesia, it has been found to be helpful with treatment-resistant depression. Not your run-of-the-mill depression where someone's having a hard time and they go to the doctor for the first time and say, hey, doc, something's going on. I think I need some help, whether that help ends up being medications, talk therapy, or other modalities. Treatment-resistant depression is depression that has failed typical treatment. And when we say failed, we mean it hasn't improved or improved enough with guideline therapy, which would be medications like SSRIs, your Zoloft, Prozac, those types of medications.
Common medications, sure.
So if we have a patient who has been on more than 2 of those medications, as well as going to therapy, trying to improve other areas of their life, like their sleep and their habits and those types of things that we generally recommend for anyone who's going through any mental health struggle, then ketamine would be on the table to discuss as a possible option.
So is depression curable?
That is a really good question and hard to answer.
Yeah.
Once someone has had an episode of depression, it significantly increases the risk of them having another episode in their lifetime. However, most people do go into remission. As clinicians, we call it remission. Most people would say that they're cured. So yes, it can be cured as far as, lay people and talking between you and I, but between myself and my colleagues, we would call it remission.
I see. Okay. And how about PTSD? That pretty prevalent through our society today, and I guess business is getting really good based on COVID.
Absolutely. PTSD is a diagnosis that most people associate with people who come back from a war or have been through a severely traumatic experience. But the truth is, PTSD is a condition that anyone who has been through any traumatic experience, and trauma is an individual experience. So a traumatic experience to you might be losing your cat, whether they ran away or they died. Anytime you saw a cat, you might be triggered. Now, one person's mountain is another person's molehill, and there are very serious cases of PTSD where they significantly impact quality of life, and people can't hold down a job or relationships. They have negative thoughts, very similar to depression. And so if, again, we've failed traditional treatments for the PTSD, ketamine is definitely a reasonable option for the next step.
Wow. And then the third bucket, tell us a little bit about how this helps with migraine therapy.
So the bucket that migraine therapy falls in is also for chronic pain. Different types of chronic pain, complex regional pain syndrome and neuropathic pain, which is nerve-related pain, as well as migraines. Again, this is something that we've found over time by using the ketamine in different trials, that it has been found to drastically improve the quality of life for patients suffering from chronic pain syndrome. Whether that's temporarily with the treatment of ketamine, and we can get into that a little bit later, what treatment of ketamine looks like, but definitely a game changer as another option for people who have chronic pain, including migraines.
Okay, you started on that path, so tell us about how therapy works, how the ketamine therapy works.
So there are a number of different ways.
What's the process, really?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. There are a number of different ways that the ketamine can be administered. Ketamine is a powder, so it can be mixed into a solution to be given as an IV or IM, intramuscular. It also comes in an intranasal form and a lozenge or tablet-like form. What the studies show is that the most effective way to give the medication with the least amount of side effects is IV, which is where we focus most of our practice. We do have other options and modalities for certain patients under certain circumstances, but to most people, IV is the best option.
Okay. Not to be, scientific expert here, but how does ketamine work?
One of the things that has made it so difficult to understand how it helps some of these other conditions like treatment-resistant depression and PTSD is that we don't really understand exactly why it works. The thought is that unlike traditional depression medications, which are often prescribed for people with PTSD also, serotonin reuptake inhibitors, for example, SSRIs, your Prozac, your Zoloft, Lexapro, things like that. They target a specific neurotransmitter in the brain, serotonin. And most of us are familiar with serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin, those neurotransmitters. There's over 40 of them.
Heard of them.
Yes. But ketamine works on a different neurotransmitter, and it's thought that that might be the reason why it is effective in these mood disorders.
So how is it used in anesthesia? Why would you use ketamine in anesthesia? Is it a chill pill?
It is. It's like a chill pill. And one of the questions,
whatever that is.
Yeah, one of the questions that I have had from patients is, wait, isn't that a horse tranquilizer? Ketamine, isn't that what we say can put a horse down? And the truth is that between animals and humans, we use a lot of the same medications. So although it is used in horses, it is obviously given to humans in much smaller dosages, because the last time I checked, we didn't weigh the same as a horse.
Hope not.
But it's a sedating medication and does have a pain relieving effect. So it was initially used widely during wars and on war fields for the pain relieving effect. And one of the wonderful things about it is that it does not decrease the respiratory drive, unlike other anesthesia drugs. So one of the safety concerns that we have whenever we give anesthesia medication to a patient is that it can reduce their respiratory drive, which is why some patients wind up needing to have a breathing tube for anesthesia.
I see.
So ketamine does not do that. It doesn't reduce the respiratory drive. It doesn't have a very significant cardiovascular effect, so it doesn't significantly affect the heart rate or the blood pressure. So it is much safer to use than some of its other alternatives. And it is still a very widely used medication for anesthesia.
So if I was a patient and I come into your clinic and I've been diagnosed, let's say, for depression, what is the relationship? Am I going to go have one therapy session and feel perfect,
That's
better?
a wonderful question.
Or is it a long-term therapy?
The most common thing that we see, it is not one and done.
Okay.
By any stretch of the imagination, it is not one and done.
Okay.
Most patients receive about 6 to 8 infusions, and these are over about 2 to 3 weeks. So a few times a week for 2 to 3 weeks, the patient comes in, gets hooked up to an IV, and for about an hour receives the IV medication. We take the IV out, make sure the patient feels okay, and they need to have a driver to go home because it's a medication that's used for anesthesia.
I see.
Some patients do need more than just the 6 to 8 treatments. Rarely we go up to 10 or 12. But for the most part, between 6 to 8 infusions, patients end up having a significant improvement in their quality of life to the point where they can continue to make changes to stay out of a depressive state.
So is one of your goals to reduce the dependency on other drugs for this? Is it a replacement or is it an enhancement?
I would say it's more of an enhancement. I don't see ketamine being a first-line treatment anytime soon, and I don't know that it should be because it is a medication. It does have its side effects and reasons to use caution with it, but
As with all drugs.
We say Zoloft and Prozac like they're simple medications, but they're a medication, and any medication you take, has its risks. So to answer your question, the ketamine is not to replace any of the medications that we use for depression or PTSD. It's to use as an adjunct. And in time, the patient may be able to come off of those medications, but we do not ask them to stop them in order to start ketamine treatment. They're used together.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. I think it's time that we take another break. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about the benefits of ketamine and ketamine therapy. Welcome back to Observations. I'm host John Walsh. Today joining us is Sadye Dexter from Life is Ketaful and talking about ketamine therapy. So my next question has to do with current conditions in the world today. I don't know if you know this or not, Sadye, but there's a pandemic that hopefully is in the rearview mirror or becoming in the rearview mirror. And I wanted to talk a little bit about how that's affected your practice. And another question would be, how do people get to your practice? So first off, how about the effects of COVID fatigue? Have you seen a spike of people that are needing
Absolutely.
therapy?
Both in my practice as a primary care nurse practitioner and in the ketamine clinic, it's been one of those scenarios that we've seen things coming through the woodwork, so to speak. Patients who maybe were able to manage some of their mental health conditions by working regularly and having a schedule and meeting up with people, having relationships. These are all things that we know help mental health, whether you're struggling with a mental health condition or not. That's one of the things that has been so worrisome with COVID and this pandemic is that everybody is struggling.
Indeed.
People who have health conditions or not. The lack of human touch and face-to-face connection,
socialization,
definitely has a huge impact on everybody's mental health. So people who didn't have a mental health condition prior to COVID may have one now. COVID may be something that has now become a traumatic experience, and some people may have PTSD now from COVID. I mean, it's very possible. And these are things that I have seen. Many people are scared, and that's one of the reasons that we've wanted to make sure that we've stayed available for people throughout the pandemic. We have not closed our doors. We have safety mechanisms in place, as we did before. I don't think many people realize in healthcare, this has not changed very much for us. These were things that we did already.
The protocols,
the hand washing, and even, wearing masks and things like that. These are things that we were already really used to. But for most people in the day-to-day lives, this has had a profound impact on them.
So how do patients end up at your clinic? Is it a referral from a primary care physician? Is it contact you directly? And I'm wondering, does insurance cover your therapies?
Those are wonderful questions.
Yeah.
Way to go.
Thank you.
So we have a variety of ways that patients come through our doors. Some of them are directly referred by their physician, their family physician, their therapist, their psychiatrist, sometimes support groups. But patients can come on in through the door by themselves and ask about ketamine. We do free consultations, so you can come on in and make an appointment so that we can discuss whether it's the right drug for you, whether, again, it's for PTSD or treatment-resistant depression or for chronic pain.
So this is just another tool in your toolbox that when a patient comes to your practice, maybe it's a traditional services that they're looking for, and through your interaction with them, might find them as a candidate that would benefit from something like this.
Absolutely, and that is one of the reasons that we are so excited to now offer primary care in the office, to get a little bit more traffic in the door and
help more people.
Yeah, offer the service to more people because so many people don't know what it is.
Can any physician administer ketamine therapy, or are you unique in that position?
Any provider who has a DEA number, which is a licensing number from the government to give controlled substances, medications that we watch very closely and are given out in very specific amounts, can give the medication. But generally speaking, you see people in the anesthesia world, like anesthesiologists or CRNAs, like Dr. Self, or nurse practitioners and physicians doing these kinds of infusions.
So I don't know the industry very well, but I know that there are, pharmacy sales reps. Is that how this is distributed to you as well?
No, we can directly order it. We don't have to have an in with a specific representative.
Okay, I see.
And to go back to your previous question regarding cost and insurance, some insurances do cover the treatment, but for the most part, we are finding that most patients do end up having to pay for it out of pocket. For most patients, they're hanging on to the end of their rope. And so they are looking desperately for help. And one of the things that we're hoping is that we're able to reach people before they get quite to that point, give a little bit more hope, and open people's eyes to the other alternatives so that we don't have so many people giving up their lives to mental health disorders. Depression is the leading cause of disability worldwide, which is a phenomenal fact if you think about it.
Say that again?
Depression is the leading cause of disability worldwide. So you think of people saying they're disabled, it's not because they've lost a leg or they've got back pain. I mean, those are reasons, but the leading cause of disability is depression. And a lot of people throw the towel in, whether that literally means they take their life or they give up hope and they stop trying. So
you guys have a big job to do, not only to spread the word to the consumer directly, but to other healthcare professionals.
Absolutely.
That this is another solution that would help their patients along the way.
And that is definitely one of our primary goals, is just to really get into the community more. And again, one of the hopes in having and offering primary care in the clinic directly is that more patients will see, more foot traffic, more patients will see the things that we offer, talk to their friends. We all know someone who's suffering with depression or PTSD or chronic pain. I mean, they're so prevalent.
Whether we know they do or don't.
Exactly. And so it's just another wonderful modality that's available.
Okay.
It can be cost prohibitive to some people, but we really do try to work with people. And at the end of the day, if this is what makes you feel so much better and gives you your life back, I mean, anyone who's been in that boat, to say that they have no control over their life anymore, it's priceless.
Wow. Okay, so again, back to the COVID world that we live in today. Mental health is conversations that's taking place everywhere. Near crisis capacity, I think, is a pretty good description at this point. And yet people are fearful of the stigma that comes along with being diagnosed as being depressed or needing mental health services.
Absolutely.
And so how do you deal with that? And where are we going with this?
That is such a touchy subject because so many people are afraid to come forward with how they're feeling for a number of reasons. Maybe they grew up thinking, being told that mental health wasn't something that was worth talking about or wasn't taken seriously. Maybe they're afraid to admit that they're struggling. But, like we talked about earlier, it being the leading cause of disability worldwide, it is affecting people in grave amounts. And at the end of the day, we all have brains. We all have emotions. We all have lives. And things happen in our lives. And so one of the ways that I try to bridge that gap is offering the time and the space for people to talk. My patients have joked with me that I have this special skill. And they say it as a compliment, but when it comes out, they're saying it in a bad way. They said, "How did you do this? It's like you sucked it out of me. I've never cried like this before. I've never told anyone these stories." And I think that happens because when I have a patient come see me, whether they're coming in for a regular checkup or they stubbed their toe and need that taken care of, I always make it a point to ask, "How are you doing?" And I don't want to hear fine. I don't want to hear, "Oh, I'm okay." I want to know how you're doing. Because we all need that check-in. And there's not a safer place than with your primary care provider. Sure. If you feel like you don't have the support in your own network, you don't have a spouse or a friend or a parent or a child that you feel like you can open up to, your primary care provider should be able to hold that space for you and take some of that weight from that stigma away from you, because we all go through it in our lifetime.
Absolutely. So it seems like there's a great success story in the application of ketamine for these specific therapies. How does it compare to the rest of the solutions that are out there?
So
is that a fair question?
It is absolutely a fair question. As I mentioned earlier, the guideline treatment for these conditions, depression and PTSD, are pretty similar. We give out an antidepressant most of the time and recommend that you go to therapy or group sessions or someone to talk to.
Stamp next.
Pretty much. And although there are really wonderful medications, newer class of medications to that area to be able to treat these conditions, they still don't always work. I have had patients come to me and they've been on more than 10 different medications and they're still struggling. And we talk about it and give them the opportunity to try ketamine. You know, we can't guarantee it's going to work. But a success rate of upwards of 75 to 80% compared to 50 to 65% with traditional medications, I mean, that's not something to, turn away from them. Yes, absolutely. And again, for someone who has lost control of their life and has maybe lost their job and lost relationships and really is not functioning anymore, to be able to give them that gift back is phenomenal.
Great.
So,
side question, just thinking about it, what about addiction?
I'm glad you asked that, because it's not something that we have talked about yet, but Dr. Self has actually had some studies himself. He's had some patients that he has worked with addiction problems who are really ready to kick this addiction problem. And with the help of ketamine, using it just like we do for the depression or the PTSD, has been able to get patients off of their addictive agent without going through withdrawals in as little as a couple weeks.
Wow.
Which is, saying a lot, because anyone who knows someone specifically who is addicted to opiates, the withdrawal from those can be horrendous. Mm-hmm. So if we can take away the probability that you're going to go through any significant withdrawal and get you off of these medications, that's a wonderful opportunity.
Absolutely.
And so that's something that Dr. Self is continuing to work on and hoping that we can get some more headway on that as well.
Wow, that's awesome. So how about telling us how people can reach your service? How do they get ketamine therapy?
So our doors are open to anyone, whether they're appropriate or not. That's a discussion that we will end up having with them individually, but we do encourage anyone to make an appointment for a consultation or tell their friends. We're
so
centrally
where are you guys located? Life is Ketaful.
Life is Ketaful, centrally located in Ormond Beach on Nova Road, 495 South Nova Road,
okay.
Across from the Florida Healthcare Plans and Manny's Pizza.
Oh, sure.
In that little section there.
That plaza.
Yep, that plaza there. And our phone number is 386-487-4673. So it's 487-HOPE is what our phone number is.
Okay, great.
And we ask that anyone come in anytime. We're open Monday through Friday from 9 to 5. And as I mentioned, we're now going to be offering our family practice services as well. So, you think about it, we can treat it.
Okay, great. So thank you, Sadye, for sharing your message with us today. There's hope.
There is definitely
demand is growing every day for mental health services. We see it everywhere. So your message is strong and very welcomed here. So thanks for sharing it.
Thanks so much for having me. We really appreciate it.
Great. Thanks for joining us again today on Observations, and join us on other shows that we have. You can search us online, Observations, Palm Coast, John Walsh. You'll find us.